I still remember the exact night everything began to shift, the night I stopped believing the version of reality I thought I was living in. It was late November of 2022, the kind of cold, sharp night where the wind cuts against your face and you find yourself pulling your jacket tighter without even realizing it. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot, outside Planet Fitness on Broad Street, the same gym my girlfriend Emily swore she was at. I wasn't there to spy, at least not at first. I was just restless. Something in my gut had been gnawing at me for weeks. A quiet unease I couldn't shake, like an itch somewhere deep under the skin. Emily and I had been together for 4 years. We met back in September 2018 at a friend's birthday party in Philadelphia. I was 24 at the time, still trying to figure out who I was after college, while she was 22, just finishing her undergrad at Temple. She had this kind of light around her that drew people in. Bright blue eyes, a quick laugh, the kind of energy that made a room feel less heavy. For years, I thought I'd lucked out. That somehow the universe had handed me a partner who genuinely cared, who loved me for who I was. We had our fights, sure, but who doesn't? Looking back, though, the cracks had been forming long before that November night. Little things I brushed aside, convincing myself they were nothing. Like the time she came home at 2 a.m. from what she said was a girls' night, and smelled faintly of cologne. Not the cheap spray you get at CVS, but something expensive, the kind that lingers in the air. Or how her phone seemed to be glued to her hand lately, the screen flipping down whenever I walked by. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I'd watched too many of those Reddit horror stories about cheating partners and was projecting. But the human body has a way of telling the truth when the mind refuses. I'd feel my stomach twist whenever she'd say, "I'm going to the gym." Especially since her sudden obsession with fitness had come out of nowhere. Emily had always been more of a casual, jog-around-the-neighborhood type. Then, all at once, she was hitting the gym 5 nights a week, sometimes twice a day. And when she came home, she didn't look like someone who had been pushing weights or sweating on a treadmill. She looked polished, hair straightened, makeup retouched. That night in November, I sat there, engine idling, music low, watching the gym doors. My heart was pounding in a way I couldn't quite explain. I checked my phone, scrolling through Instagram mindlessly, but I wasn't absorbing anything. Just waiting. I finally pulled up the Find My app, the one she'd casually shared with me a year earlier when we took a road trip to Boston, in case we got separated. At the time, it felt cute, like some modern-day version of wearing each other's initials on a necklace. At night, though, it felt like a loaded weapon in my hands. I expected to see her dot pulsing right there in the gym parking lot. But it wasn't. Instead, it was about half a mile away, hovering over a Holiday Inn near the highway. For a second, I thought maybe the GPS was off. Technology screws up sometimes. I refreshed the app. Still the same. Holiday Inn. My chest went cold, like ice water had been poured straight into my lungs. I didn't drive there that night. I wish I could tell you I had the guts to just storm over and confront her, to demand answers on the spot. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there for almost an hour, staring at that little blinking dot on the screen. My thoughts were a storm, images of her in someone else's arms. Her laughing the way she used to with me, her peeling off those gym clothes for someone else. I hated myself for even thinking it. But once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. When she finally came home later that night, around 11:30, she was all smiles. She tossed her gym bag on the floor, hair pulled back into a neat ponytail, water bottle in hand, like nothing was wrong. I played along, nodding, asking how her workout was, listening as she rattled off some half-hearted story about running into an old friend on the treadmill. I smiled, but inside something had cracked wide open. That's the thing nobody tells you about betrayal. It doesn't hit all at once. It seeps in slowly, like water through the foundation of a house. At first, you just feel the dampness. But by the time you realize what's happening, the structure you built your life on is already rotting. The weeks leading up to that night had been deceptively ordinary. Thanksgiving was coming up, and Emily had insisted we host her parents at my apartment. I remember standing in the kitchen with her, bickering over whether to buy canned cranberry sauce or make it from scratch. It felt so normal, so domestic, that part of me clung to the illusion. If she was planning dinners with me, laughing about whether her mum would judge my overcooked turkey, then how could she possibly be sneaking off to a hotel with someone else? But then there were the late-night showers. She'd come home, claim she was sweaty from the gym, and immediately hop in the shower, sometimes twice in one night. And her phone, always face down, always locked with a new passcode I hadn't even realized she'd changed. Little things. Always little things, until they weren't little anymore. I found myself replaying the past in my head, combing through 4 years of memories for signs I'd missed. The summer of 2020, during the pandemic, when we quarantined together in my tiny one-bedroom apartment. We'd binge-watched Tiger King like everyone else, argued about mask mandates, cooked elaborate meals just to pass the time. Back then it felt like us against the world. But now I couldn't help but wonder. Was she already texting someone else while we were curled up on the couch, my head resting on her lap? That's what betrayal does. It rewrites your history. Suddenly, every smile, every inside joke, every quiet moment feels suspect. I didn't say anything that night in November, or the next night, or the one after. I kept it bottled up, trying to convince myself I was wrong, that maybe she'd gone to the hotel for some innocent reason, meeting a friend, grabbing dinner, anything but what my gut screamed it was. But deep down I knew. I'd known for a while. The Holiday Inn was just the first undeniable crack in the glass. I carried that knowledge with me into December, into Christmas shopping and family gatherings, into all the little rituals that should have felt warm, but instead felt hollow. Every time she reached for my hand, every time she kissed me goodnight, I wondered whose lips she'd been with hours before. And still, I stayed silent. Because admitting it out loud meant admitting my life was about to change forever. By mid-December, I couldn't carry the weight of silence anymore. It was like dragging an anchor behind me everywhere I went. Work felt impossible. I'd sit at my desk at the insurance office, staring at spreadsheets, pretending to care about deductibles and claims, while my mind replayed the blinking dot over that Holiday Inn. I'd catch myself drifting off in meetings, wondering who she was with, what he looked like, what he had that I didn't. Christmas was the breaking point. It wasn't one single moment, but a series of small detonations that finally set off the bomb. It started on December 23rd, the night before we were supposed to drive to her parents' house in Jersey. Emily said she was heading to the gym again, around 7 p.m. She kissed me quickly, tossed her duffel bag over her shoulder, and left. I sat on the couch, trying to distract myself with a Sixers game, but I couldn't. My eyes kept flicking to my phone. My chest was tight, my stomach knotted. I told myself I wouldn't check, that if I trusted her, I had to stop obsessing. But at 7:43 p.m., I caved. Her location was at the hotel again. Same Holiday Inn, same damn blinking dot, hovering there like it was mocking me. My hands were trembling, palms sweating, heart racing like I'd just sprinted a mile. This time something inside me snapped. I grabbed my keys and drove. The streets were quiet, lit up with Christmas lights strung across row homes and shop windows. People were probably wrapping presents, drinking hot cocoa, doing all the cozy things I should have been doing with Emily. Instead, I was pulling into the Holiday Inn parking lot, my headlights sweeping across rows of cars, my chest burning with a mix of fury and dread. I parked a few spaces away from the lobby entrance and sat there, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. I didn't know what I was going to do. March inside, demand to know what room she was in. Part of me wanted to. Another part of me was terrified of what I might see. After about 15 minutes, I spotted her car. It was parked toward the back, away from the main lights, like she didn't want it to be noticed. That was all the confirmation I needed. No more excuses, no more, maybe it's a glitch. She was here. I didn't go inside. I couldn't. Instead, I sat in my car for 2 hours, watching the hotel entrance like some desperate, broken version of myself I barely recognized. At 9:56 p.m., she finally walked out, not sweaty from a workout, not tired, not carrying her gym bag. She was in a black dress I hadn't seen before, her makeup fresh, hair perfectly straightened. She wasn't alone. A man walked out behind her, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a navy peacoat. They didn't touch, but the way they moved, close, like magnets that wanted to snap together, told me everything. I felt sick, like my insides had been ripped out. I wanted to scream, to get out of the car and confront them, to demand answers. But I froze. I watched as they got into separate cars, him pulling out first, her a few minutes later. She drove home like nothing had happened. When she walked through our apartment door around 10:30, she tossed her duffel bag onto the floor again, just like always. I remember staring at it, wondering if she even bothered putting gym clothes inside anymore. I didn't say a word that night. Not a single word. But something inside me had shattered, and there was no putting it back together. The next day, Christmas Eve, we drove to her parents' place. I played the role, smiling, answering questions about work, helping her dad hang up last-minute decorations. Her mom made her famous pecan pie, and Emily laughed with her cousins, looking every bit the perfect girlfriend. But every time I looked at her, all I saw was that black dress, that hotel lobby, that man. I felt like I was suffocating in a room full of people who had no idea the truth. On Christmas morning, she handed me a gift, a watch I'd been eyeing for months. She kissed me on the cheek, smiling as if nothing in the world was wrong. I unwrapped it, forced a smile, thanked her, but inside I wanted to scream. How could she sit there, in front of her whole family, and act like we were fine? The real breaking point came 2 days later, on December 27th. I'd spent the days after Christmas replaying everything in my head, my emotions ricocheting between anger, heartbreak, denial, and a cold, creeping numbness. That night, I finally broke. She said she was going to the gym again around 8 p.m. I didn't even bother checking her location this time. I already knew. Instead, I went straight to the hotel. My hands shook the whole drive, the steering wheel slick under my grip. My breath came in shallow gasps, my heart slamming against my ribs. When I pulled into the lot, her car was already there. I parked next to it and just sat there for a minute, staring at the empty driver's seat, at the little Christmas air freshener dangling from her rearview mirror. My chest felt like it might cave in. I got out of my car and walked toward the lobby. My legs felt heavy, like I was wading through cement, but adrenaline kept me moving. The automatic doors slid open, and the smell of chlorine from the pool hit me, mixed with the faint scent of industrial carpet cleaner. I walked up to the front desk, my voice low and tight, asking if they had a guest named Emily Reynolds. The clerk, a young guy who couldn't have been more than 21, gave me a polite but firm smile and said they couldn't give out that information. I almost lost it, right there. But before I could push further, the elevator dinged. And out she came, Emily, in the same black dress, hair perfect, makeup flawless. And right behind her, him. The world stopped. She froze when she saw me, her eyes widening, face draining of color. For a split second, it was just us, locked in a stare that said everything words couldn't. My heart hammered so loud I swear the whole lobby could hear it. I didn't shout. I didn't make a scene. I just looked at her, then at him, and turned around. Walked straight out the doors, back to my car, and drove home. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely keep the wheel steady. My chest ached like someone had taken a knife to it. When she came home an hour later, she tried to talk, but I couldn't hear it. Not then. I locked myself in the bedroom, collapsed onto the bed, and stared at the ceiling until morning. That was the breaking point. The moment the illusion finally shattered beyond repair, the morning after I saw Emily at the hotel with him, the world felt different. Everything looked the same. The pale winter sunlight leaking through the blinds, the faint hum of the radiator in my apartment, the quiet of the city outside, but I wasn't the same. I woke up with my chest heavy, my throat raw like I'd spent the whole night screaming even though I hadn't said a word. Emily was in the kitchen, moving quietly like she was trying not to wake me. I could smell coffee brewing, the faint sizzle of eggs on the pan. It should have been comforting, the kind of morning we'd had hundreds of times before, but instead, it made me sick. I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second from the night before. The way her eyes had widened when she saw me, the man behind her. The silence between us that said everything words couldn't. When I finally got up and walked into the kitchen, she looked at me like a stranger. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed red, like she hadn't slept either. She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand to stop her. I couldn't do it yet, Not then. My voice shook when I told her I needed space. She nodded, silent tears sliding down her face, and I walked out the door without touching my breakfast. The days that followed were a blur of anger, numbness, and exhaustion, and crashed on my friend Jason's couch for a while, unable to stomach being in the apartment with her. Jason didn't ask questions at first. He just handed me a beer and turned on ESPN, giving me the space to sit there in silence. Eventually, though, I told him. I spilled everything. The hotel, the lies, the man. His face hardened, jaw clenched, and he muttered something about how he'd always thought Emily seemed too smooth. I hated hearing that. I didn't want validation. I wanted to rewind time, to unsee what I'd seen. At work, I was a ghost. My boss pulled me aside after I botched a client meeting, asking if everything was okay. I mumbled something about personal stuff, and she nodded, her eyes soft with pity. That pity gutted me more than anger ever could. People could sense it, the heaviness clinging to me, the way I moved slower, spoke less. Even my mom noticed when I called her after New Year's, my voice cracking as I tried to act normal. My mom. God, telling her was one of the hardest things I've ever done. She'd always liked Emily, always said she was a good influence on me, more organized and ambitious than I was. When I told her what I'd discovered, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then softly she said, "I'm so sorry, honey. You didn't deserve that." I almost broke down right there, hearing the kind of unconditional support I'd been denying myself. But the nights, that's when it really hit me. Lying awake on Jason's lumpy couch, staring at the ceiling in the dark, my mind refused to shut up. I replayed every laugh, every kiss, every "I love you" she'd ever said. They all felt like lies now, tainted by the image of her stepping out of that elevator, in the black dress. I started questioning everything. Had she been lying for months, years? Did she ever love me, or was I just a placeholder until something better came along? Food lost its taste. Music felt like noise. I'd put on a playlist we used to listen to on road trips, the Lumineers, Hozier, a little Springsteen, and every lyric felt like a knife. I stopped listening altogether. Even silence hurt less, and the worst part, I kept checking her location. Even after moving out, even after telling myself I was done, I couldn't stop. It was like picking at a scab. I'd watch her dot hover over the same hotel again and again like some twisted confirmation that everything I'd built was gone. I spiraled. Some nights, I drank too much. Cheap whiskey Jason kept in his kitchen cabinet. It dulled the ache for a while, but the mornings were brutal. Head pounding, stomach sick, and the grief still there waiting. Other nights, I'd scroll endlessly through Reddit, reading posts from people who'd gone through the same thing, betrayal stories, cheating confessions. It was both comforting and horrifying, knowing I wasn't alone but also seeing just how common this pain was. The new year rolled in with fireworks outside Jason's window. People shouting, celebrating, kissing at midnight. I sat on the couch with a beer in hand, watching the light burst across the sky and felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. Emily texted me on January 2nd, a long message about how sorry she was, how she didn't know why she did it, how she still loved me and wanted to work through this. I stared at the words, my thumb hovering over the screen, but I couldn't respond. Every letter felt like poison. By mid-January, the depression was eating me alive. I'd wake up exhausted, drag myself to work, come home and collapse. Jason tried to pull me out of it, suggesting we hit a Sixers game or grab dinner somewhere, but I usually declined. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was betrayal. It messes with your sense of reality, makes you doubt yourself. I kept asking what I'd done wrong. Was I not enough? Did I miss some glaring flaw in myself that made her seek out someone else? And then came the anger. Not fiery, explosive anger, but a slow-burning rage that simmered under my skin. I'd be walking down Market Street on my lunch break, the cold, January air stinging my face, and I'd imagine her laughing with him. I'd picture them in that hotel room, and my fists would clench, my teeth grinding. It scared me sometimes, how dark my thoughts got. By February, friends were starting to notice. Jason finally sat me down one night, a look of frustration and concern in his eyes. "Man, you can't keep doing this to yourself," he said. "She made her choice. Don't let her take everything from you. His words stuck with me, even though part of me resisted them, but he was right. I was losing myself. The fallout wasn't just emotional, it was physical too. I lost nearly 15 pounds without trying. My clothes hung looser, my face gaunt in the mirror. I looked like a ghost of who I used to be. Co-workers whispered about how tired I looked, and even my boss asked if I needed time off. I started seeing a therapist in late February, after my mum gently suggested it during one of our phone calls. Walking into that office, sitting on the couch with tissues on the table beside me, I felt exposed. But for the first time in months, I said it all out loud. The hotel, the lies, the way my reality had been ripped apart. And hearing it in my own voice, raw and unfiltered, hit me harder than I expected. Therapy didn't fix me overnight, but it gave me a place to put the chaos, a container for all the grief and rage. Still, at night, the ache remained. Lying alone in Jason's apartment, scrolling through old photos of Emily and me on my phone, I couldn't escape the feeling that the best years of my life had been wasted on a lie, and yet, somewhere deep down, a tiny ember of resolve was forming. A part of me that refused to let her betrayal define me forever. The fallout had broken me. But it was also the first step towards something else, something I couldn't quite see yet. By March, the fog began to lift. Just enough for me to see that if I didn't start taking control, Emily's betrayal would be the thing that defined me forever. And I wasn't ready to let that happen. I remember the exact day the shift started. March 14th, 2023. It was a Tuesday, grey and damp, one of those Philadelphia days where the rain isn't quite falling but the air clings to your skin anyway. I was sitting in my therapist's office, slouched on the couch, staring at the bookshelf stacked with psychology texts I'd never read. I'd been venting about the same cycle, checking her location, replaying the hotel scene, feeling like a hollowed-out shell. My therapist leaned forward and said, "What would it look like if you stopped letting her write your story?" It hit me like a gut punch, because that's exactly what I'd been doing. Letting Emily dictate the narrative of my life, even when she was no longer really in it. That night, I deleted her from Find My. It sounds small, almost trivial, but for me it was monumental. For months, I'd been chained to that blinking dot, watching her life unfold in real time, while mine disintegrated. Clicking remove felt like cutting off a limb, but also like finally breathing fresh air after being underwater too long. I didn't stop there. I blocked her number. Blocked her on Instagram, Facebook, everything. I even gathered up the photos, the ones framed on my nightstand, the Polaroids stuck on my fridge, the candid shots buried in my phone's gallery, and put them in a box. I didn't throw them away yet. I wasn't ready. But boxing them up felt like closing a door I'd left wide open. But even as I tried to move forward, a darker urge gnawed at me, revenge. I'd read so many stories on Reddit, watched videos on YouTube of people getting even with cheating partners, and the idea sank its claws into me. Why should she get to walk away unscathed? Why should she keep playing the victim in her own story when she was the one who shattered mine? It started with little things. I knew her Netflix password. It had been our shared account for years. One night, after a couple of whiskeys, I logged in and changed the profile names. Hers became Liar, the other one became Hotel Lobby. I laughed out loud when I saw it, even though I knew it was petty. But the bigger part of me wanted something deeper, something that would actually make her feel the weight of what she'd done. I considered telling her parents. Her mom adored me, always said she hoped we'd get married someday. Part of me wanted to sit across their kitchen table and lay it all out, the hotel, the man, the lies. But I couldn't bring myself to drag them into it. They'd find out eventually, I told myself. Instead, I turned the focus inward. If she was going to destroy me, then I'd rebuild myself in a way that left no trace of the man who'd once tolerated her lies. I started with the gym. Funny, isn't it? The very place she'd used as her cover became my sanctuary. At first, it was rage that drove me, pounding the treadmill, lifting weights until my muscles screamed, blasting Metallica in my headphones like I was trying to drown out her voice. But over time, it shifted. My body changed, sure, but more importantly, my mind did. Each drop of sweat felt like a little piece of her leaving me. By April, I looked different. Leaner, stronger. People at work noticed. Even Jason, who'd seen me at my lowest, raised an eyebrow one night and said, "Damn, man, you're starting to look like a different person." That was the first compliment in months that actually landed. But transformation wasn't just physical. I started going out again, small steps at first. A beer after work with co-workers. A Saturday night Sixers game with Jason. Even a trivia night at a dive bar down in South Philly, where I surprised myself by actually laughing, at dumb jokes about Friends reruns. And then in May, something unexpected happened. I matched with someone on Hinge. Her name was Claire. She was a nurse, a couple of years older than me, with this dry sense of humor that caught me off guard. We grabbed coffee on a Sunday afternoon, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't thinking about Emily. I was just there. Sitting across from someone who asked about my favorite books, who laughed when I admitted I still hadn't seen all of The Sopranos, who told me about the time she accidentally paged the wrong surgeon at 3 a.m. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was a spark of something new, and it reminded me I wasn't doomed to live in the wreckage forever. Of course, Emily didn't just vanish from my life. In late May, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. I'd moved back in after a few months at Jason's, and she knocked on my door like she still had the right. When I opened it, she looked smaller somehow, tired. Her eyes searched mine, but I didn't give her what she wanted. She launched into a monologue about how she'd made a mistake, how the guy from the hotel didn't mean anything, how she'd been confused and lost. For a moment, hearing her voice, seeing her standing there, part of me wanted to crumble, to let her back in, to pretend none of it had happened. That's the cruel thing about betrayal. It doesn't erase love instantly. Feelings don't vanish just because someone breaks you. But then I remembered that night, the hotel lobby, the black dress, the way she'd frozen when she saw me. And the ember of resolve inside me flared into fire. I told her no. Not angrily, not loudly, just firmly. I told her I deserved better, and that whatever we had was gone. Her face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes, but I didn't budge. She left, and I closed the door. This time I didn't collapse afterward. I stood there, breathing hard, but steady. That was the real turning point. Not the gym, not therapy, not even meeting Claire. It was looking Emily in the eyes and realizing she no longer had power over me. By summer, I felt like I was living again. I ran a 10K in June, something I'd never thought I'd do. I took a weekend trip to New York with Jason, caught a Yankees game, and sat on a rooftop bar watching the skyline glow at night. For the first time in months, I felt the weight lifting. But the story wasn't finished. Because even as I moved forward, even as I rebuilt, there was still one last piece of closure I needed. Something that would cement the fact that I wasn't the man Emily had broken anymore. And I knew exactly what that was. By late summer of 2023, my life felt almost unrecognizable from the man I had been in November of the previous year. I didn't think about Emily every second anymore. Her betrayal was no longer a jagged wound, constantly bleeding into every moment. It had become a scar, one that reminded me of how far I'd come. The shift didn't happen overnight. It was subtle, like the sun slowly rising after a long, dark night. I stopped checking social media obsessively, stopped letting the smallest reminders of her ruin my day. Even the occasional text she sent, filled with, "I miss you" or "Can we talk?" didn't shake me anymore. I read them, let them float past like smoke, and deleted them when they had no more effect. I rebuilt my apartment into a space that felt like mine again. I put up new posters, swapped the furniture around, bought a few plants that thrived despite my notoriously poor attention to them. Every corner of that place whispered resilience, not heartbreak. Jason often joked that it looked like a magazine spread now, but I knew it was more than aesthetics. It was my reclamation. Claire was part of that. She became a constant presence in my life, not because she was a replacement for Emily, she couldn't be, but because she reminded me that connection didn't always have to hurt. Our coffee dates turned into long walks through Rittenhouse Square, into museum trips, into lazy Sunday mornings, where we'd sit in my apartment talking about everything and nothing. She never pressured me, never demanded, never judged. And slowly, without me even noticing, I started to laugh again. A real laugh, the kind that shakes your chest. One September night, I was walking home from the gym. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of roasted chestnuts from a nearby street vendor. I passed the old Holiday Inn, the same one where Emily had broken my trust, and for the first time, I didn't feel anything. No anger, no heartbreak, no longing, just a quiet, steady sense of closure. I realized then that revenge wasn't about seeing Emily hurt or making her regret what she'd done. True revenge, the kind that mattered, was living well, living fully, refusing to let her actions dictate the quality of my life. I'd turned the tables in a way she could never touch. I had rebuilt, I had grown, I had survived. Work had improved too. By October, I was managing my own team at the insurance office, earning praise from my boss, who commented on how focused and composed I seemed. My parents noticed the change as well, texting me pictures of my mom's garden, or sending silly memes with a caption like, "Look at our resilient boy thriving." It was small, domestic stuff, but after months of chaos it felt like a victory. Even the memories of Emily no longer carried the same weight. They were there, sure, like photographs in an album. Some were funny, some were bittersweet, but none could hurt me anymore, and I learned something profound in the process. Betrayal doesn't just show you someone else's true colors, it shows you your own strength. I never ran into Emily again after that September night. I didn't stalk her, didn't seek closure. Part of me wondered if she had moved on, if her life carried the same rhythmless pattern of lies and half-truths. But it didn't matter. My life was no longer tied to her story. My narrative was my own. By December 2023, I found myself at a small Christmas market with Claire, walking among twinkling lights, warm cider in hand. I could hear laughter all around, smell cinnamon and roasted nuts, feel the cold bite of winter on my cheeks. And for the first time in over a year, I felt complete. Not because I had someone new in my life, though that was wonderful, but because I had myself back. I had control over my happiness, my choices, my life. Sometimes in quiet moments I think about that first night, the night I saw the dot at the Holiday Inn, and I don't feel rage anymore. I feel gratitude. Grateful that I survived it. Grateful that the heartbreak didn't consume me. Grateful that I found the courage to walk away and the discipline to rebuild. Betrayal had tried to define me. It failed. I emerged on the other side, not just intact, but stronger, wiser, and more aware of my own worth than I had ever been. And that's the lesson I carry with me every day. The people who leave scars in your life don't have to own the story of your recovery. You do. Every step forward, every laugh, every small victory, those are yours. You get to decide how the story ends. As I walked past that Holiday Inn one more time that winter, lights flickering in the early evening dusk, I smiled to myself. That chapter was closed. The future was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again.